sometimes there is conflict when it comes to Martech implementation. And I, as the person who's heavily involved with Martech, and sometimes I was the marketer on the marketing team, I've done my research. Like I've chatted with other experts who face this problem. I've read a bunch of guides. I read other people's frameworks. I did my own research. I have my own past experience. I have a good idea of how something should be solved. But sometimes this idea isn't shared with other technical counterparts who maybe didn't do the same research or don't have the marketing use case or background that I do. What's your playbook for getting alignment between marketing and technical teams when it comes to conflicts like this? Like, how do you help both sides understand each other's constraints and requirements before conflicts arise, other than obviously like, knocking on doors and having those conversations? Like, what else comes to mind?
So what I also like to do is to start small, right? So for instance, with implementing the CDP, we started with a POC, a proof of
Mhm.
concept that was super small. Was we got 2 markets, one brand each market. That's it, right? So one of the markets we got one that in this case Brazil, because for one of our brands Brazil has a specificity that it's only theirs that we don't have in the other markets. So we're like, okay, let's get that case that's a little harder for us to test, just to make sure that we're kicking the tires in the best way possible here. And then we could see, okay, so we did the POC and we were able to see the data coming, right? I was able to see the data unified. I was able to help on the unification again, prioritizing which sources of data, etc. And then the data was ready for me to use in the marketing automation platform. So there we could already test against a lot of the pain points we had. The pain points on data cleaning and unification, and the pain points on us having the data ready for activation. And it worked well. Okay, so we were able to take those pain points from the different teams, yes. And that also helps us with data privacy and data security because we did it with APIs and everything was done properly, etc. So yay. Okay, so we got that done. Is that okay for everybody? Right? So before implementing anything big, anything major, we always do something smaller. And then we kick the tires and we reconvene and we analyze it against the criteria we had when we first selected. So we had a list of criteria. That's what we want to do. We did the POC, went back to those criteria, checked against our pain points, and then it worked. And then we proceeded to implement into all like 20 markets, 4 brands each back then. Right. And then, okay, because if we had any comments or any issues or any questions, we would say, you know what? We did the POC and that's what we saw. And that's why we are where we are now in the implementation. Is that okay? Yes. Awesome.
Yeah.
So
Do you ever
that's
do
how we
multiple
do it.
POCs at the same time? Like, what if the technical team is just like, I don't want to do a POC for that thing. Like, I think the solution is something completely different. And like, is there ever an area where you're doing one POC for this one side of the conflict and we see how that works? We take notes and we don't make a decision until we do another POC. Like,
Oh,
how many
yes.
POCs do we do to satisfy conflicting opinions before we just like put a line in the sand and say like, this is what we're
This is
gonna
the
go to
one.
bat with?
Right. So it really depends on. So the most important part here is to define what you want to achieve with the platform through the
Yeah,
POC. Right. So in our case, we wanted to have that unified view. So that was one of the most important criteria. We need to have that information over time. Over time is important to us because we don't know the end user. We are not used to have this data. So we need to know when Anna became part of the database, etc., so that I have that more detailed view. So that was first one, right? Because otherwise we wouldn't need the POC. We could be just using the marketing automation platform and sending the latest data or relying on real time use cases. A lot
yeah.
of companies do, and that's fine. But it was not our case specifically here. So we need to define that, right? We also took into consideration the pain points. So that's why I want like what we want to achieve and then the pain points. So the pain points, we have small teams at this point,
Mhm.
right? So we need to make sure that we also automate some things that allow us to move at a good speed, a time efficient speed with the teams as they are now without a lot of dependencies on vendors, consultants, because we don't know if we're going to get that budget at this point, right? Does that check? Check. So, yes, right? So, a lot of it really comes down to having that list. But to get to that list, right, you need to have a lot of conversations with the stakeholders. And you need to have some conversations where I was like, okay, so tell me what the pain point is. I didn't ask in those terms, but it was a lot of discovery to understand where the resistance was. Because
Mm.
sometimes the resistance was on this. Oh my goodness, they think they're gonna start sending me a lot of unclean data, and I'll need to be cleaning data, I'll need to hire someone. I don't know
Mm.
if I have the budget. What if I don't have the budget? But sometimes the person has all that knowledge, but she's not bringing it to the call,
Mm.
right? So a lot of it was also me probing a little bit. So
Mm.
what is the concern here? Is the concern that the data won't come clean? Because that can be resolved. It can be accommodated. We can help. Give us an opportunity to test that, and we can show you that we can do that or put that as a constraint. So whenever we are analyzing those platforms, I know that I cannot even think of increasing the team to ingest or digest data in order to get a platform. If it requires for us to grow the team, it's not a good platform for us.
Mm.
Remove it. Right. One of the criteria also that we had with the CDP back then was that the company, the CDP company, needed to guide us because some CDP companies that we saw back then were very self-service, right? Which then it works super fine if you have a team of developers. But we didn't. We had like two. So
Mm.
that was one of the criteria that we put there. We need the
Mm.
hand holding because otherwise we're gonna be running circles for too long. And that's not advisable at this point. So all those things we had to have we had very, how can I say, frank conversations,
Mhm.
right? And it took us a while to get there. Really a while. But it was a lot of back and forth,
Mm.
right? A lot of so in our case, when we got to the POC, we already had selected a tool because it had already met the criteria. So the POC was really to kick the tires and make sure that at the end of day, on the day-to-day basis, it would really meet what we needed. And it did. Awesome. Otherwise, we would have to go to the runner up or start the process all over again and see if we could find another vendor or if another type of platform that would meet our needs. But there's a lot of conversations here and a lot of, so I think that I would say for marketers, if you bring the pain points, if you bring the issues that you have in your team and you open that up to the other stakeholders, that is very helpful,
Mhm.
right? Because then they can understand, well, you know what? The issue for us is that we have very limited teams, we have a limited budget. So anything that helps us decrease the cost per acquisition will help. It's going to be awesome because that's a pain point for us. We need to do more with less or more with the same, right? Or conversely, I need the teams to be able to do their own stuff or to tweak a template inside the platform in a way where I can review or in a way where that is recorded because if there are any errors, we can catch it and rectify it. Right. So when we bring that up to the other teams, they're like, oh, okay, I understand. So my team also has those type of pain points or limitations. So we need to take
Mhm.
that into consideration too, right? And those conversations, of course, you can have external consultant vendors helping, but a lot of those conversations really need to take place within the company, right? So what are the teams are going to do on a day-to-day basis with those? Because the consultant won't have that view.
Right.
a lot of times, or
Yeah.
the vendor won't have that very in-depth view, but you do. So that's why I tell marketers, lean in, because you are the one who knows those things. You live and breathe that. Don't
Mhm.
let someone else decide. Don't let a vendor come or a consultant come and decide that for you, without your input. Go and make yourself heard. Bring your experience, bring your processes, and that is how you can contribute without knowing how to code or etc.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the point.